welcome to Highly Informed. I'm your host, Sean Salvaje. Highly Informed is all about entheogenic education and news you can use when it comes to cannabis in the world of psychedelics. I'm sitting here with Vlad Bautista of Happy Munkey. I am so happy to have Vlad here in Texas, in the Lone Star State, because Vlad's coming to us from New York. And if you know me at all, you know I have so much love for New York. So Vlad, thank you so much for joining us here today.
I'm honored to be here. It's my first time in Austin, first time at South by Southwest. You know, always been a fan of what you're doing here. So to be here in person and be part of this new amazing movement you got going on is an honor and a pleasure.
How has everybody been taking care of you? You getting a good Texas welcome?
Yeah, so far so good. I just got here yesterday, but I'm loving the vibes, loving the food, loving the people. So I'm happy to be here.
Have you gotten barbecue?
Yes.
Good.
I went to Stubbs yesterday.
Stubbs is right on. Stubbs is right on.
That was pretty cool.
As the co-founder and managing member of Happy Munkey, which is an internationally known New York City-based cannabis events company, but you guys are kind of like in a whole lot of things.
It's a lifestyle company, so we do everything from events, media, merchandise, advocacy, and now hopefully this year we'll end up being licensed and be able to operate in New York finally.
That's right, because, okay, so tell us what's happening, like what's the latest update with what progress in New York when it comes to cannabis, because they talked about legalization last year, but we all know that takes time, it's a process, but what I'm hearing is that we're gonna start seeing licenses come out.
Yeah, right now it's such a historical and epic time over there because for the first time in history, in any state, what's happening is they just dropped the regulations a couple of days ago, where the first 100 licenses will go to people that were either arrested for cannabis or have a family arrested, have had a family member arrested for cannabis. So it's groundbreaking. So I've been like on a media tour. In the last 72 hours, I've been on USA Today, CBS, CNBC, and Channel 11 News.
All right, so it's really happening in New York. Like even the mainstream networks are really picking things up.
Exactly.
It's really going to be big because whether people like it or not, New York influences what happens around the world. It's a global capital. What do you think, how do you think the landscape of cannabis is going to shift now that we're bringing New York online?
I think that what happens in New York in the next 2 to 5 years is probably going to impact what happens in the country and in the world. Part of that being because Washington, D.C. mirrors a lot of their legislation after what happens in New York in multiple industries. So I think it's going to be similar here because like you said, it's the financial culture capital of the world. You got like 7 million people visiting on a monthly basis. So what happens there, influences a lot what happens everywhere. And I think that I'm really proud to be from the Empire State because they're really going about it in a comprehensive, fair and equitable way, and this first step is just a perfect example of that. And I think when the rest of the country sees the impact and how this benefits everybody long term, I think it's gonna become a trend throughout the country. Mm-hmm.
It's so important to get the formula right, and you're dead on when it comes to DC and New York being connected. How I ended up in New York was because I was working for the Pentagon and I was doing national media brokerage, and a lot of that was having these conversations about what was going on with the Department of Defense, but we realized from DC that to really reach the legislators, it wasn't even, and we were in DC.
That's crazy.
To really reach legislators, we needed to be in New York. And it had to be a much larger conversation. So it's really amazing to see that also illustrated in cannabis. So New York really does have like this leading edge where it can influence what happens around the world when it comes to creating equity. So for you earlier, we were talking, I had to go out. I'll confess, I had to smoke a bowl before we started shooting. I've smoked a bowl before every episode. It's just like, it's gonna become ritual now.
That's the industry we're in. You gotta you gotta, intake what you're preaching about. So
exactly.
that makes me love being here even more.
And we have to destigmatize the use, because I'm sitting here, I'm doing this, we're here, I'm present. But the thing is, it's an accessible medicine that can really just help you to like tap in, get into flow. What kind of ideas, like I'm curious about flow when it comes to you, because you're in New York, so you've seen like this hustle, right? New York has this vibration about it. It's fast paced, it's honest, it's like a little bit in your face, but I think people misinterpret New York as being in your face in an aggressive way. It's in your face like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, we're not messing around, but we're also welcoming to people who are down for the same, like who are also trying to rise up. There's a lot of respect to have for that, but I'm curious, coming from that perspective, and then also playing in cannabis. I've seen Happy Munkey launch events like the Van Gogh Museum. I really want to understand like how creativity plays into your methodology when it comes to leadership, or like your philosophy when it comes to leadership, because I see that creative edge in there. So I'm curious, like, what is your perspective on that?
It's part of what New York is. It's like a funnel of people from all over the world that want to chase their dreams, that are creatives, and they all come there to try to make them come to fruition. So me being born and raised there, I get to really understand the world in a different way, because the world comes to New York basically, and then I need to also come to places like Austin and South by Southwest to get more inspiration and understand where the future's heading, what the nuances are, what the other industries are, because this is so important, because cannabis overlaps with every industry in the world at some point or another. So it's very important always for me to understand how society is moving as a whole, because I need to understand how I, through my events and my movement, am going to impact that and make sure that cannabis is inclusive to all these industries and people from around the world.
I love that concept of influencing how the landscape is developed, but not in the way that most people think of influencing it. Like most people think of this influencing as being like something you do behind the scenes, very corporate, really almost kind of fake. This is like an influencing, and I think that's how a lot of people approach it. But this is a kind of influencing from within the grassroots, where it's authentic, and it's influencing not by force, but by simply showing up. How has showing up just shifted how has that helped you grow? Just showing up and being like, hey, this is what I do, this is what I'm about. Let's connect if you're in, or let's go our own way if you're not. Like, how does that work for you?
It works really well because cannabis is such a new industry in its infancy. The information is not really out there. When you really think about it, compared to other industries, there's not so many people involved yet. So, you really need to go and show up to the MJ Business, to the Revels, to all these things going on around the country, so you can understand what the tribe is doing on a national level. So then wherever you're from, you are operating in a way that is in sync with pushing the message through the whole country. So I always tell people that. They always ask me, like, what's the best thing they can do? I'm always like, you gotta show up, because it's not like everything is Googleable. It's like you need to talk to a Sean and get mentorship. You need to talk to a Vlad, you need to talk to Christine to really understand what's happening out here, because the information is not as accessible, and it changes every day. So if you don't show up and really keep your pulse on it, it's gonna be hard to really keep up as it matures.
As you see more people showing up within the industry, what do you think are some of the spaces that where you see people who are going to make it? How are they differentiating themselves in a positive way?
Well, what I've noticed is that you have to have some type of purpose behind your brand, because I'm sure you've seen, and we all see, like, a lot of people just thinking that you're going to spend dollars on marketing and you're gonna just, you know, sort of like do what worked in other industries. And cannabis is something that's like very tribal and part of a ritual of people's lives, and you really gotta really have a purpose for people to follow your movement or your brand or your dispensary, whatever you're doing. So I think the people that are being most successful and having the biggest impact have a bigger purpose than just trying to just sell a lot and just trying to get the consumer's money. You have to have a why and a purpose, and then the money will follow. You can't just come and try to fabricate it just to take the money. It's not gonna work that easily.
Well, I'm curious how you think this is gonna play out for the people when it comes to New York and it comes to money. Because we know, like Gotham City, New York has a certain level where some people have thrived, but there's also a level where some people have been left to wither. Not for lack of ability, but just because of the way the system's been designed. How do you see cannabis kind of leveling the playing field for people who have been in those disenfranchised communities, who've been incarcerated even for not even just selling, but have just possession, simple possession? Using a medicine, it's been a medicine for many people for many years, and it was for their ancestors too. How do you see this shifting the story of New York?
Well, that's part of my whole mission and my whole fight. You know, we've been advocating over there and trying to help them understand why, because, you know, I'm a very practical, realistic person, right? I understand that it's, people are bound by systems and by the situations they're in. So the corporate people are bound by their bottom line, by their investors. I get it, you know, that's the way that system works. People on my side have been oppressed by the system, the government systems. So what I've tried to preach to them is, like, right now, a big fight of what I'm speaking on tomorrow on a panel is legacy to legal. Throughout the country, they had the philosophy of, like, we're gonna ostracize people that were in the legacy market, we're gonna clean it up, we're gonna make it new and shiny and brand new, and that has failed.
I kind of see that happening in California too, and they're really upset and angry with a lot of legacy operators because it's undercutting the legal market, but it's like they didn't make space.
So I think New York is changing that, because right now it's the first time that actually thinking about comprehensive ways of lowering the barrier, getting them access to funds. And I think ultimately that's the smart move, not just for the people that got harmed and the communities of color. It's the smart move for everybody, and I'm gonna tell you why. So what happens is you lower the barrier, all these people come in, take their 80 years of experience from the legacy market, come bring it to the other side. Now consumers get more tested cannabis. These people, like myself, that bore the brunt of the war on drugs and prohibition, get to create generational wealth, get to create opportunities for their communities. The state makes more taxes because now you've shrunken the legacy market because you allowed them into the legal market, and ultimately the high tide raises all the boats, and not even corporate cannabis ends up doing better because the market as a whole is better. So I think that New York understands that, and that's why they're doing stuff like they're doing right now, because they saw what happened in California, Oregon, Nevada, etc. So I think that they're trying to take a comprehensive way that's sustainable long term, and I think ultimately it's gonna help repair all the harm that was done when it was in prohibition.
Part of why I feel like New York's bill is so progressive is because, like, I know some of, Christopher Anderson works for the Cannabis Control Board. Is that what they call it?
Alexander?
Christopher Alexander. Thank you for getting me right. Christopher Alexander. And when I first met him, part of him being in that space is that he actually is from the city. He is actually from the people. I met him, he was going to law school with a friend of mine at CUNY. So it's like people who are actually involved in the community, who really care about New York and understand how different cultures come together throughout the 5 boroughs to create something bigger. How do you see us doing that in cannabis? And how do you see us including people just like Christopher, who came up in the beginning or in the middle of the community in the space, but are now looking to level up?
Well, that's part of the reason that I think all this is happening, because, you know, all those places that I mentioned that things didn't work, a big reason why they didn't work is because you look at the control boards, you look at the legislators, you look at the regulators, and none of them look like me and you or like Chris Alexander. So New York has a lot of black and brown politicians in positions of power, senators, you know, people on the board, and etc. And I think that's why it's going the way it's going, because the reality is that, like, I gave you an example, right? Like in New York right now, there's 10 ROs, 10 medical operators. Mm-hmm. And the operators, none of them are in, you know, urban or disenfranchised communities. It's trying to serve them medically. Yeah. And the reason for that is they're all owned by, you know, corporate white people, frankly. So they don't have the cultural competency. I'm a first-generation Dominican to come to a neighborhood like I grew up on and educate the people on why it benefits them medically. Mm-hmm. So that's why the only way this is going to change, which I think New York is starting to understand, is that there has to be people that own things that look like us to be able to get our people to understand what's happening, because no matter how good intentioned other people are, they don't have the cultural competency to engage with these communities and these different cultures. Absolutely.
You know, I recently went back for Revelry New York, which was amazing, and it was really cool to have
people, Lulu and Jacoby.
They're amazing. They were so welcoming, especially like this Texan ad place up in New York, but also very much in my place because I love the city. But it was exciting to see legislators in the room, not only with legal operators, but also with legacy operators. We know we had some legacy folks in that space. And teaching people how to try to find their way through the system. And then also having an open conversation with legislators about redesigning the system. I'm curious, like growing up in New York, how did that make you more innovative? Because really a lot of this is a matter of innovative perspective. How did the way that you grew up influence your own personal creativity?
Well, you know, it's like I said, you know, just, you know, growing up in a city like New York, like you mentioned earlier, you know, people take it the wrong way, like, you know, New Yorkers are rude or whatever, but it's really a combination of two things. Is that New Yorkers are really busy because, you know, it's not easy to survive over there. And then the second thing is, like you said, people are not fake, so people are going to tell you exactly what it is, whether you like it or not. And
this is what I love about New York, to be honest. I'm like, and I make sure I don't get on anybody's bad side.
You know, it's just helped me go to all these different neighborhoods and meet people from all over the world and really understand cultures and religions from all over the world. And I think that has played a big role in like Happy Munkey and our events. Because, like, you know, when we set this out 5 years ago, you know, my partner went to Amsterdam, Ramon, which I think you met, and he smoked at a cafe, and he was really touched because he's a little bit more of an introvert. He's more the creative, and he came back to New York. He said, "Wait, this is the future of cannabis. We got to do this." Yeah, I said, "You're crazy. This will never work. This is New York." I know, I'm telling you. And, you know, we started doing events, and it went really well. We started once a week, then once a month, then we were always up to 7 days a week, and then Forbes called us, like the Studio 54 Cannabis.
Yeah, that was amazing. Like, I remember watching from the sidelines and being like, what? Look at this, it's blowing up.
The big deal was, it was community, right? It's just that in this divided time and era in life, people all agree on cannabis. And whether you're from Main Street or Wall Street or a legacy or an athlete or a doctor or a lawyer, at the end of the day, we're all stressed out and we need a joint or a blunt. That is unanimous. So I think cannabis is like the great equalizer that brings communities together and people together to better understand each other. I think it's the scalpel to something bigger, to unifying community and people in the world.
Well, speaking of community, you're a single father, right?
Yes.
So you have a daughter?
Yes. I have a
How old
daughter.
is she?
She's 7.
Oh, Lord, precious. I remember when mine were that young. So for you, when it comes to building this new future, what are your hopes for her?
Well, she is my why and purpose. You know, she's definitely a big motivation and inspiration to everything I do. And, you know, for her, is like, you know, I told you my parents born and raised in Dominican Republic. You know, they went through a lot for me to be here. And, you know, even though we came from humble beginnings here, it was still an upgrade from where they grew up at in Dominican Republic. So now, you know, I'm trying to do the same for her, you know, to make sure she has the resources, education, and knowledge to continue moving the family name forward. And more importantly, for her to know that her father was here impacting the world and society in a positive way and being somebody that she could be proud of that made the world a better place.
That's really powerful when you think about it, when you think about what the children of minority people have really been left and now what we're really able to create. Because I feel like the vibration, something has shifted in the frequency.
1,000%.
Yeah.
For real, yeah, because it's like I said, you know, this country and places like New York, it's always the immigrants and the people that come with the real hunger and the inspiration that really make real change and come up with new things, you know. Usually as, you know, generations get past, you know, people don't still have that same ambition and hunger. So this whole country is built on that. And, you know, immigrants are the people that keep that fire going in this country.
100%. How do you, okay, so now you've seen all this success. You're still growing, but you're really on top of things right now. How do you stay hungry when you feel like you're being fed?
The way I stay hungry is that, you know, I really feel like we got a long way to go. And to me, success is different than what it means for other people. See, other people measure success by how many material things you acquire, how many zeros you'll have in your bank account. To me, that's not what I'm after. To me, what'll be success, because you're not going to take any of that with you. I'm not going to take any of that with me. The ultimate measure of success to me is how many people did I positively impact and helped while I was here in this world. And that's, I want that number to go up with as many zeros as possible, more than my bank account. And that is the ultimate measure of success for me. So I feel like I got a long way to go because there's a lot more people that I got to touch.
And that's kind of like indicative of the industry at large, is like when you win, I win if we do this right. And when I win, other people are going to win. And if we're all winning, then what's the issue, right? So there's less to fight about when we're lifting one another up. There's less to fight about or be afraid of when it comes to the unknown, when we're actually tapping in together. What did you kind of like, how did that influence your community when you were growing up in New York? How did you learn this information? Because so many people are really focused on what they can get for themselves. They focus on their own bag, which is important. But how do you remember what it really is about at the end of the day, which is all of us?
Well, what it is with me is like, I guess that goes into more like my philosophy and perspective on life. So I wasn't fortunate enough to like get like a high level academic education. You know, I didn't go to college, etc. But what I have done is I have this perspective, right, that the best books in the world are people. And every time I meet a person, I'm reading through them like a book. And I've had the fortune to read through thousands and thousands of very smart people. So since I have that perspective, I think that it keeps me going, and I'm always eager to meet more people so I could read through these human books, because the best books in the world are people if you look at them that way. And that's the way I look at every person I meet, like a book that I could learn from.
I love that. Not just learning how to read people, no, but actually learning how to read people, actually learning how to understand one another. I appreciate that so much. Vlad, thank you so much for coming here and sharing space with me so we can learn to understand one another. Folks all the time say that New York and Texas don't have anything in common, but they don't know what's really true, because at the end of the day, it's all people, right?
That's it. And remember, I'm honored to be here. I'm happy that you're doing this, because the number one issue we have in this industry and in society is the lack of education about this plant. So thank you for being part of that mission. And for everybody out there, remember, you're too blessed to be stressed. Things will get greater later. Always choose happy.
Let's go. Always choose happy and stay elevated. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Highly Informed. I'll see you next time.